Systems thinking. Systems thinking is one of the most powerful perspectives we have on understanding most of the things in the universe, right? You can describe anything with it. And it is a child of the general systems theory, right? What is the general systems theory? The general systems theory, put in it simply, you have take a computer program, right? You have this computer program that you input some variables, right, into, and then you have a process in which that input is then converted into an output, right? So you might say, so you're seeing everything just as a machine. Wow, revolutionary, right? But that's not the principle I'm going for. The principle that general systems theory tries to dig in is that the world is much more complex than we think, right? Simplicity is just a product of us human abstracting complex system into forms that we can objectify, right, and categorize. But everything, mean everything, is connected in one way or another, right? Something very far away, but very, very far away, can still affect the results of a process in a city, mind you. You could say, like in the Russian forest, right? Something happens, right? It could affect some business deal in the New York Central Exchange, right? And you might think, that's, yeah, like, it's kind of true. Anything can affect anything, but it's kind of far-fetched and like it's very fantasy driven. But taking into that concept that everything can affect everything, right? And that everything is interconnected, we humans don't have the brain capacity to even understand, fathom all that, right? We can't even think about large numbers. We cannot visualize large numbers. Like, even for some of us, right, including me, just visualizing the number billion is like a whole task and seems kind of impossible, right? I've never seen a million of something except like grains of sand, and I've seen much more than millions. I have never thought they were millions. So that's all to say that the computational power of the brain cannot handle the complexities of real interrelationships of life, right? And that's where general systems theory comes in which it simply states that you can model a process or an input and output through a use of a system that is just the conglomerate of the input, a through output, and then a final resolution or output. There are many different names. No need to be technical with it, right? The only thing is that general systems theory, given that it's working with complex systems, right, and abstracting these complex systems to be able for the human brain to understand them, right, comes to a definitive problem, right? At which scope such that the human brain should look at an ecosystem, right? The ecosystem is relating to all the systems that affect that system. How large do we want that scope? How much complexity do we want to view? And it's is necessary to understand this system in particular, right? Because even if we want to, it would take a lifetime or even more lifetimes that we think to just understand all the relationships of one system, because how we already defined, everything is related to everything. If you want to understand completely and its absolute definition a system, you need to understand everything in the universe. There's no other way, right? But you can estimate, right? I used to estimate in like the word estimate like in an interchange of abstract, right? That's the same way that some serious mathematical series estimate the value of some complex series, right? That has a lot of processes and computations. We can derive a general solution or a general solution set to a given system without needing to compute every other system related to that one, right? So, systems thinker, right? Abstract very complex system into their essential components to then understand it, right? And how can this mentality really help us? Well, as an experience, I've been studying general systems theory, right? And I've found it very useful when talking about cultures, economics, and even sciences, right? But here's a central problem when it comes to the general systems theory that I think people need to change academically and just in daily life. They think that systems theory only applies to the exclusive subset of STEM, right? Sciences, mathematics, everything that concerns science. But I've really seen that it also can be modeled in social sciences and also in culture, in everything. When I say everything, you can view the system everywhere you go, right? Somebody related to you is having a problem, right? A social crisis, something. You can model where it came from. What the main root of it, or you can abstract it, right? And the problem of abstracting is that you might lose important information, right? Because you're removing interconnections from the system, right? So it's really a complex way of thinking if you compute a lot of systems together, right? And you can see it anywhere. Like when I say everywhere, the way this bed was made is a form of system, right? It really contributes into economics and the markets of the textile industry, the bed manufacturing industry, the social life of the Chinese workers that probably worked on it, right? And it really relates to a lot of things, but I'm only concerned in knowing how this bed was made, which materials, how it is made. So the first thing when you are modeling, right, and first starting on systems theory is really defining what you're studying or trying to understand, not particularly study, but analyze and understand, right? This can be a partner of yours, this can be a process that you want to build or a process you want to model, right? You really need to define what you're looking for and what you really want to understand. Because if I just want to understand the humble bed, it really concerns a lot of things out of the scope and really just unnecessary if my purpose is just to know how a bed was made, right? So first off, you need to define what you're looking for, what you want to understand, right? Second off, you need to understand some characteristics that general systems theory and systems thinking, pardon, brings to the table. First off, given that we're removing information, right? And really it's not an absolute system in which we're evaluating every variable, you need to assume that with giving the same variables, right, to a system modeled, it can give you different outputs, right? Say that you have this friend of yours, right? He's had a particular problem like twice already, and it always because of something commonly that he did, his way of being, and really you have to find that as the input into which it makes a problem in their life, right? And then there's a third situation in which he did the same thing, right? You would say to that friend, like, you already know what happens when you do that, but aside that, right? You as the systems thinker, right? You say, this is because of this, right? So given the input of his bad behavior, right, this is what's gonna happen. The same thing that happened the previous two times, right? Because you have modeled it like that, you have thought of it like that, and you have evidence for that. But given that you're really just stripping the situation down to its essential meanings, but not adding the additional information that are the interrelationships of other systems, right? Something could have changed, or something that really didn't take place but was there when it previously happened can take effect now. So given the same input in the previous two situations, now in this third one, that doesn't mean that the same thing is going to happen this time, right? So you need to assume that same variables can always lead to different outputs. Maybe you try and make a statistical approximate of, oh, this is the this model has correctly 80% is correct 80% of the time, and that's a great way to model it, right? Because you can see the errors of your model. But that is more when you're talking about sciences and all that. We're talking about social, right? How to apply it daily life. You can also apply it in science, and that's where it originated from, but there's a lot of practical uses for it. And I really want to bring home that you can use systems thinking, right, in your daily life. And now, getting back to that, right, you cannot assume that the same inputs will give you the same outputs at previous times, right? And by consequence of that, you cannot assume that different inputs are going to give you the same output. Or, my bad, different inputs are going to give you different outputs, right? So, given that, you really can't always assume with 100% certainty that given an input, you're going to get an output. But you know what you are 100% certain about? That given this input, something happens that it changes it, right? And alters it into this output, right? The point is to view that relationship. It's not to view the input nor the output, because you're always saying, this is like, I'm not 100% sure if I model the input and the output as an XY table, it's gonna always be true. But you always know for a fact there is a function and a process that happens in between X and Y, the input and the output variable, right? So you try to model this, right? I generally think that systems thinking really, in fact, gets the intuitive aspect into life, the importance of intuition, right? Because given that we don't have definitive answers for this input being modeled to this output, but we do know that there's a process in between. Given the goal, this is in the case you will have a goal, or just not just trying to analyze or understand the system, you need to have that intuition that what is going to make better, right? This system. Better is very subjective. Like giving in systems thinking, everything is subjective, right? Because you do not know every system that correlates with that system, right? So you need to have an intuition on what makes this better, right? You observations and studies upon those specific problems can give you that intuition. Knowledge does give you the wisdom to have that intuition, right? And given that, you want to understand the system by first studying it, observing other systems alike, or what you might say alike in your subjective point of view, right? And then try to understand it to the best of your capacity. Now, you're never going to be able to understand a system completely. However, you may be 99% of the time correct, right? It's the point is always not to be correct, right? But to have that certainty to say, I'm confident on what I understand because I have observed it and analyzed it to my best of my capacity. And how do you analyze something to your best of the capacity? First, you need to also have intuition on how big do you want that scope to be? How much systems do you want encompassed in your analysis, right? And in your understanding. The more systems, the more closer to the process you may get to. It's not a definitive, but given so, more systems you have into view, the better you can see this like worldwide view of the problem or the goal or the thing you want to understand, or in other terms, the system, right? The subject system, right? Your ecosystem, you can amplify, take more things into account, or reduce it. That is just the principle of abstracting and putting it more complex. I really don't remember the terminology, but it's abstraction and complexity, right? While you expand it, you put more complexity into the ecosystem, right? And while you shrink it, you put more abstraction into it. Abstraction is a very good tool, and that's what the human brain usually does. It really like abstracts to the essential parts that contribute mostly to that system, right? And amplification or complexity really just gives you that worldwide scope that might give you the chance to view other systems that really interconnect and really give that effect on it that you previously haven't taken into account, right? So the best approach to understand something as a systems thinker is to really reduce the problem to its core components or abstract it first, right? And first off, you need to take the ecosystem and really put that circle in to really abstract it into its main values or essential values, and then slowly but gradually keep expanding that ecosystem until you really think that you really have the tone on it, on how these things works and how different system or multiples of system really affect on it, right? But a problem that comes into play that we're looking as the subject as a fixed size, right? As a fixed size. The system, we see it like, let's say, just a point that it's just absolute, right? And we see the ecosystem as the variable that we can shrink or expand. But even the system, right? Just the subject to system, you can keep subdividing them into other systems and subsystems, right? And then understanding them, right? So it's really a battle of really abstraction in subdividing the subject system and expanding or reducing or abstracting the ecosystem, right? You really want to look for that balance in which you can say, I have the essential components and some of the additional systems that contribute not significantly, but if summed everything up, they really take a essential role on it, right? And also the subdivisions or the levels of subdivisions in the subject system. So it's even the most simple of systems can be really simplified, right? Into essential core as if they can also be an extremely complex web of interconnected systems, right? Take, for example, math. Math really has this absolute, I would say, quote unquote, meaning to it, right? Or just value to it. But each branch of mathematics really has a essential role to model different things, right? So it really interconnects into different branches and really helps to model different things that may be related or may be seen as not related, and it's very complex. The only thing that I want to get to, I know it's been a long rant, we're like 20 minutes already, but I just really want to give you the beginner's guide, right? the essentials, the fundamentals of a systems thinker, right? And you really need to understand that not everything that you view as simple is really simple, right? You only find it simple because you abstract it to be simple, right? And the purpose of systems thinking is to really grasp the complexity and the interrelationships and study those interrelationships to really understand what you want to understand, the subject, right? So if you have a problem, you really want to first off strip it to its essential cores and then branch out into more complex and really find the nitty gritty of it, right? So given that, how do you start being a systems thinker? Well, you already are. You started with this video, right? Even, I don't know if you're here, but if you really just heard the first 10 minutes or 5 minutes, you're great, right? But systems thinking is really a discipline, right? It's a self-discipline. Nobody's gonna integrate that in your mind. You really need to practice to find the complexities of even the most simple of things. Really ask a lot of questions, right? So with that given, I really implore you to try this mentality and how you can use it in philosophy, economics, and anything that you really want to try and understand, even social networks, right? But I give you as a goal, you maybe want to try to model your first system. It's pretty easy. Just put a box. This is the process that happens. Just connect it, right? And this is the input and this is the output. It's really helpful when it comes to computer science and all that. You can really model problems and the goals you want and how to reach them, right? But you really need to have persistence when it comes to systems thinking, right? Because it's really a hard discipline to get into, right? But once you get the essentials, it's very easy to gradually step up and be able to understand everything that you want to understand. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.